right, so you guys want to talk Jimmy Carter.
Let's do it.
You know, this is our 39th president.
Yep.
And we got a lot on him. We got, the Wikipedia article. We got some other articles. We even have, like, some personal notes here about, from people talking about interacting with him and things like that.
Sounds like a good mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this will be fun. So I guess the question is he a failed president? Or is he a visionary ahead of his time?
Yeah. I mean, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
I think historians still go back and forth. Like, is he a weak president or a humanitarian hero? But I think the reality is a lot more interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, even when you look at, like, his early life, you kind of see that dichotomy.
Okay. So let's go back to the beginning. Early life. Jimmy Carter, born 1924 in Plains, Georgia.
Plains, Georgia.
Small town.
Yeah.
Peanut farms.
Not exactly like the resume you would expect for a future president.
Right. So, I mean, how does that happen?
I know. And yet from there, he goes to the U.S. Naval Academy. He serves on a submarine. And you think about that, that military background, that probably gave him a real sense of discipline, problem solving, things that end up being like really useful in politics.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, it wasn't like peanut farm straight to the Oval Office, huh?
No, not at all. So after the Navy, he goes back to Plains, and he manages the family peanut farm. But he starts to get involved in local politics. So you've got, like, the Georgia State Senate, then he becomes governor of Georgia. And it's really in those roles, where he really honed those skills, and he developed this reputation for honesty and integrity.
And that really takes us up to, like, his presidential bid, right? 1976. I mean, that's post-Watergate America. Everyone is, like, disillusioned with the establishment.
Yeah, total disillusionment. And so here you have Carter, this peanut farmer from Georgia, and he really positions himself as the outsider, like the fresh start. He runs on this platform of honesty, ethics, I'm going to return government to the people kind of thing. And he actually ends up defeating the incumbent president, Gerald Ford.
Yeah, pretty big deal. And then, like, almost immediately, right? Second day in office, he does something that, at least on the surface, seems kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah.
He pardons all the Vietnam War draft dodgers.
Yeah, big move.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't that a risky move? I mean, especially for a new president who's trying to, like, establish himself.
Hugely risky. And I think it really shows something about Carter. Like, his convictions often overruled any kind of political, like, calculation. I mean, he saw the pardon as a way to heal the country, from Vietnam to move forward. And I think he wasn't really afraid to make these big decisions, even if it meant, alienating certain people.
It does seem very principled, but, I mean, did it backfire? Did people see that as him, like, letting people who broke the law off the hook?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was definitely pushback, especially from veterans groups and people who felt like it was undermining the rule of law. But for Carter, it was really about, like, reconciliation. It was about acknowledging the moral complexities of the war.
And this focus on doing what he thought was right, even if it wasn't, like, politically popular, that seemed to, like, come up again and again during his presidency.
Yeah, it's a theme.
Like, for instance, with his national energy policy.
Yeah.
I mean, here he is pushing for conservation and price controls, new technologies, the stuff that we're, like, still debating today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Carter, he was ahead of the curve on this stuff. I mean, he understood that dependence on foreign oil was dangerous. And he knew that, like, we needed to develop alternative energy sources. And he actually creates the Department of Energy, like, to deal with this specifically. And he faced a ton of opposition. But in a lot of ways, his vision kind of set the stage for, like, the whole renewable energy movement that we have now.
It is kind of wild how some of these things that, like, may have seemed radical at the time are, like, pretty much mainstream ideas now.
Definitely.
But, I mean, did he actually have any concrete successes when it came to, like, energy during his time as president?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he signed laws, giving tax breaks for solar and wind power. He put in, like, fuel efficiency standards for cars, tried to promote energy conservation. Heck, he even put solar panels on the White House roof.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, it was a symbolic gesture. But, I mean, it showed he was serious about this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So he was, like, putting actions behind his words.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that not everybody was on board with this.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, you had the oil industry, You know, a lot of businesses, even some consumers just weren't ready for the changes he was calling for.
Okay.
And this is going to be something you see over and over again with Carter. He tackles these big problems, but it always means, you know, shaking things up and making choices that not everyone's going to like.
Yeah, yeah. Like, what about when he deregulated the airline industry?
Oh, yeah, big ripple effects from that one.
Yeah.
I mean, Carter, he believed that if you deregulate the airlines, you're going to have lower fares and you're going to have more competition.
Okay.
And while, yeah, I mean, it led to some big changes in the industry, there were definitely unintended consequences, too.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, you know, less strict safety rules, and eventually you saw the big airlines starting to consolidate.
Oh, okay.
So it's complicated, right?
Yeah, it does seem like, you know, every decision, every policy, there's like pros and cons to all of it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think about leadership, right? And how hard it is to know what the long-term effects of these big changes are going to be.
Right, right.
It shows that throughout his presidency, Carter was willing to, like, really challenge the way things were, even if it meant people were going to criticize him or there were going to be setbacks.
Okay.
And, you know, a really good example of this is his decision to bail out Chrysler, the car company.
Wait a minute. Wasn't Carter, like, opposed to bailing out companies?
Yeah, I mean, he was a fiscal conservative.
Right.
But he also knew that if Chrysler went under, it was going to be a disaster.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're talking thousands of jobs. The economy would have been hit hard.
Wow.
It was definitely a pragmatic decision, and it probably went against, like, some of his personal beliefs. But ultimately, I think he saw it as a way to help people, you know, to prevent more suffering.
So he was willing to, like, bend on his principles if it meant, like, protecting everyday people.
Yeah, in this case, yes. And it wasn't an easy choice. I mean, he really struggled with it. But in the end, he chose what he thought was best for the whole country, even if it meant, you know, being criticized by everybody.
And it seems like that idea, that willingness to put what's good for the country ahead of, like, politics, that kind of carried over into his foreign policy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, because, I mean, Carter's foreign policy, that's often seen as, like, the most controversial part of his presidency.
It is. And, you know, he had this mix of idealism and pragmatism. He was all about human rights and peaceful solutions.
Okay.
But he also had to deal with these really tough situations that tested those principles.
Okay, well, let's get into that. Let's start with, oh, wait, he created, like, Asian American Heritage Week.
He did, yeah. It's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month now. But yeah, he signed that in 1978.
Wow.
You know, acknowledging the contributions of those communities. It was definitely a symbolic act, but it shows his commitment to inclusivity.
Yeah.
You know, recognizing everyone who makes up America.
Yeah, it's cool to see that. It's like, amidst all this, you know, political stuff and the economy and all that, he's also trying to deal with these social issues and celebrate diversity. That's not a side of him that you always hear about.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the big dramatic moments of his presidency. But yeah, he really did focus on promoting equality and justice here at home.
Okay.
And, you know, that commitment to human rights, that goes beyond the U.S.
Okay.
That really shaped how he approached foreign policy on a global level.
All right. Well, that sounds like a perfect place to pick things up next time.
Yeah, let's dive into that foreign policy.
Okay, so we were talking about Carter's approach to foreign policy, you know, kind of that mix of idealism and pragmatism.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Well, let's start with, I mean, probably his biggest achievement on the world stage, the Camp David Accords.
Okay.
This was Carter as peacemaker.
Yeah, this is the one where he brings together Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, right?
Yep.
Like, these are leaders from countries that had been at war for, like, decades.
Decades, yeah. And Carter knows this.
Yeah.
He knows how big this is.
Yeah.
And he decides he's going to personally mediate the talks
Okay.
at Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland.
Okay, so for 13 days,
13 days?
he's going back and forth between these two leaders.
Yeah.
Just, like, working it out.
Working it out. I mean,
Trying to get them to find some common ground.
yeah, what was that like? I mean, did he just, like, lock them in a room and say, you can't come out until you figure this out?
I mean, not quite,
Yeah.
but it was intense, you know?
Yeah.
And Carter, he took this really careful approach.
Okay.
You know, really diplomatic, but also trying to connect with them on a personal level.
Yeah.
He kept saying, look, you both want peace.
Right.
This is good for your countries. It's good for the whole region. And he really listened to their concerns.
Okay. You know, built trust by just being honest with them. And in the end, I mean, it worked.
Yeah, they actually signed a peace treaty,
They did.
ending the state of war between Egypt and Israel.
And it's still in effect today.
I mean, come on, that's That's a pretty amazing accomplishment.
It is. It's a testament to Carter's, belief in dialogue
Yeah.
and his commitment to peace. I mean, that's what got him the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002.
Oh, yeah.
Really solidified his reputation as this international peacemaker.
Okay, so that's a high point for sure. But foreign policy is rarely, just a straight line from success to success.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis. That really kind of overshadowed everything else.
It did. And the Iranian Revolution, it was complicated. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, some people say that Carter letting the Shah of Iran come to the U.S. for medical treatment, that was like a trigger
Oh,
the whole thing, but it's way more nuanced than that.
right. And there's this whole argument that, the way Carter handled the hostage crisis
Yeah.
made America look weak. What do you think about that?
Well, Carter, he was really focused on keeping those hostages safe.
Okay.
He wanted a diplomatic solution.
Okay.
He did not want to use military force because that would have put them in even more danger. I mean, he understood how volatile the situation in Iran was.
Yeah.
And he knew that, escalating
first.
Exactly.
But I mean, wouldn't a more forceful response have kind of been like, okay, don't mess with us?
That's the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people say, yeah, we should have been tougher.
Yeah.
Sent a message,
Right.
But then others say, Carter's restraint
Yeah.
probably saved lives, kept things from getting out of control.
So it's kind of like there's no easy answer there.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong,
Yes.
It's foreign policy, it's messy,
Yeah, especially in a region like that.
especially in that region.
Okay. So we've got this hostage crisis going on.
Yeah.
And then in 1979, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
That really was a turning point in the Cold War, right?
Huge turning point. I mean, it shattered this period of détente.
Okay.
We were trying to relax things a little with the Soviets.
Yeah.
But this invasion, Carter saw it as a threat to everyone.
Right.
I mean, a violation of international law.
Yeah.
So he takes action. He puts a grain embargo on them, boycotts the 1980 Moscow Olympics, and he starts giving more military aid to the Afghan resistance fighters, the Mujahideen.
So basically the Cold War got even colder.
Yeah, it definitely froze things over, the invasion of Afghanistan. It meant we were going back to this more confrontational stance with the Soviets, and those effects were felt for years.
Yeah, so you've got all of this going on in foreign policy. Plus, you've got the economy struggling back home.
Yeah, not a good combination.
Yeah.
It all kind of created this perfect storm that led to Carter losing the election in 1980.
To Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan.
But before we move on from his time as president completely,
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting, despite those setbacks and, all the people criticizing him,
Yeah.
he did have some wins in foreign policy too.
Absolutely, he did.
Like what?
Well, he helped normalize relations with China.
Okay.
He signed the SALT II treaty with the Soviets to limit nuclear weapons, and he laid the groundwork for the Panama Canal Treaty.
Yeah, that one was pretty controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people saw that as weak, like we were just giving away something important.
Yeah.
But for Carter, it was about doing the right thing,
Good.
giving Panama back what was theirs. And actually, it helped our relationships in Latin America.
Oh, okay. So even though, it was a tough decision,
Yeah.
it ended up having some positive outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, he was willing to take those risks if he thought it was morally right, even if it meant getting heat for it back home.
Right. And even, his emphasis on human rights
Oh, yeah.
as a central part of foreign policy.
Big part of it.
That seems more and more relevant these days.
It does, yeah.
I mean, he really seemed to believe that promoting human rights around the world, that wasn't just a nice thing to do.
No.
It was actually essential to keeping things stable and secure globally.
Yeah, he really thought that.
And he called out dictatorships,
He did.
human rights abuses,
Yeah,
even when it made things awkward with countries we were allied with.
that's right. And, a lot of people, they thought he was naive or too idealistic.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Yeah.
He helped make human rights a bigger deal on the world stage.
Okay.
And that paved the way for a lot of the human rights work that's happening today.
So yeah, I mean, the more we look at Carter's life, the more we learn
Right.
how complicated it gets.
It does.
You know, he wasn't perfect.
Nobody is.
He made mistakes.
Right.
But he really seemed to be driven by this, like, strong moral compass.
He did. And a sense of empathy.
Yeah, and that empathy, that, you know, being able to connect with people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why, you know, after he left office, things were so different for him.
You think so?
Yeah, it's like he was meant for a different kind of leadership role.
Interesting. Yeah, tell me more.
I mean, he wasn't interested in, like, grabbing power or attention. He just wanted to help people.
Yeah, you know, you hear people call him the quote-unquote post-presidency saint.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, so tell me about this transformation.
Well, I mean, he didn't just retire and, you know, go play golf.
Yeah.
He and Rosalind, they founded the Carter Center in 1982.
That's right.
And that's a nonprofit that's all about, like, promoting peace and global health.
Exactly.
And they've done some incredible work. I mean, like, eradicating guinea worm disease.
Yeah, millions of cases down to just a handful.
I mean, how did they do that?
Well, there's no, like, magic formula.
Right.
But they were persistent, they were dedicated, and they really worked from the ground up.
Yeah.
They went into communities,
Okay.
taught people about the disease, gave out water filters, trained local healthcare workers.
Wow.
They knew that, like, if you want to make real change,
Yeah.
you got to empower people to take charge of their own health.
So, I mean, it wasn't just, like, throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
It was really about, like, working with people,
Yeah.
listening to them.
Listening, yeah, figuring out solutions that actually work in the long run.
And it sounds like that approach, that, like, community-based approach, that was a big part of everything the Carter Center did.
Yeah, and they've done a lot.
Yeah.
Monitoring elections, promoting democracy, human rights, you know, trying to resolve conflicts,
Oh,
improving agriculture, all kinds of stuff.
that's a pretty impressive record.
It is. And he didn't just, you know, sit in an office.
Yeah.
He was out there. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even in his 90s, he was building houses with Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, that's right.
He believed in leading by example.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty,
Right.
whether it was, you know, building houses or mediating a conflict or handing out medicine. He understood that leadership means service.
Yeah.
It's about putting other people first.
And that seems to be something that, like, you know, comes up again and again throughout his life.
It does.
You know, from his time in the Navy to being governor to being president.
Yeah.
And then, like, all this work he did after he left office.
Mhm.
It's like this sense of duty,
Yeah.
you know, this commitment to something bigger than himself.
It's there.
And it wasn't just, like, his public life either.
Nah.
I mean, he's been married to Rosalind for over 75 years.
It's true. Amazing partnership.
Yeah, father, grandfather, Sunday school teacher.
Sunday school teaching.
I mean, he's a guy who's lived through, like, huge historical events, but also just, you know, the everyday stuff too.
Yeah, the human side of things.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think that one person could have such a, like, diverse and impactful life.
It is.
But I mean, he didn't do it all alone, right?
No. Oh.
You mentioned Rosalind earlier. What was her role in all this?
I mean, Rosalind Carter, she has been his partner.
Yeah.
In every sense of the word. They've been side by side through everything. From that peanut farm in Plains to the White House and beyond.
Yeah, and people have said that they're, like, the most successful political partnership in American history.
I've heard that too.
You know, and their marriage, I mean, that's a testament to, like, their love and their shared values.
Absolutely. They face challenges,
Okay.
triumphs, you know, always supporting each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's inspiring
It is.
to see a partnership like that last so long.
Yeah, and it reminds you that even with all the demands of public life, you can still have a strong personal relationship.
Yeah.
You know, something that gives you meaning.
So, I mean, clearly Carter's post-presidency years were not about just sitting back and relaxing.
Oh, no, not at all.
He really embraced this new kind of leadership,
He did.
you know, one that was focused on global issues and humanitarian work.
Yeah, he changed what it meant to be an ex-president, showed that you can still be a leader even when you're not in office.
Right.
He used his platform to help people in need,
Yeah.
promote peace, you know, inspire others to get involved and make a difference.
And he did it all with this, like, humility
Yeah.
and authenticity
Yeah.
that people really responded to.
Yeah, I think that's what people connected with.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to be in the spotlight,
Right.
but his actions, you know, They really spoke for themselves.
They did, yeah, about his character.
Okay, but his story's not over yet, right?
No, not quite.
I mean, even with all the health challenges he's had in recent years,
Yeah.
he was still teaching Sunday school in Plains
Yeah, still connected to his community.
and his faith.
Yeah.
And then in February of 2023, he made the decision to enter hospice care.
Yeah, going back to his roots.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad,
It is.
but it's also like a reminder
Yeah,
that even people who've lived these extraordinary lives,
it's true.
they ultimately go back to the simple things, you know,
Yeah,
family, community, faith.
it all comes back to that.
So we're kind of approaching the final chapter of Jimmy Carter's life.
We are.
And it's, you know, a good time to think about his journey
Yeah.
and the impact he's had.
Uh-huh.
But before we get to that, I'm curious about something.
Okay.
You know how we were talking about his presidency earlier
Yeah.
and how at the time, a lot of people saw it as a failure,
Right.
but now, like, there's this whole reevaluation going on.
Yeah, his reputation's definitely changed.
Yeah. So what happened? Why are people looking at him differently now?
I think it's partly just time, you know?
Okay.
Like, we're far enough away now that we can see his presidency more clearly. It's not just about the hostage crisis or the economy anymore. We can see how his policies played out in the long run.
Okay.
Like his focus on human rights, his emphasis on diplomacy, those things matter more now.
So it's like we're finally catching up to Carter's vision.
Maybe. I mean, think about his energy policy. He was talking about energy independence way back then.
Right.
He knew we needed to move away from fossil fuels, invest in renewables.
He was ahead of his time.
He was. And don't forget about the Panama Canal Treaty.
Oh, yeah. Giving control back to Panama.
That was huge and super controversial at the time. A lot of people saw it as a sign of weakness. But Carter, he saw it as a matter of justice. And it actually ended up strengthening our relationships in Latin America.
So, again, he's willing to take a hit politically if he believes it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. He was always guided by his principles, not just trying to score political points.
And his focus on human rights, I mean, that feels more important now than ever.
It does. He truly believed that promoting human rights, promoting democracy, that was crucial for global stability.
Okay.
And he was willing to call out human rights abuses, even when it made things difficult with our allies.
That must have been tough, especially during the Cold War. You know, when it was all about realpolitik and nobody really wanted to rock the boat.
It was, but he did it anyway. And you can argue that he helped make human rights a bigger part of the global conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's clear that the more we learn about Carter, the more complicated he becomes.
It does.
I mean, he wasn't perfect, obviously. He made mistakes.
Of course. But he was always trying to do what he thought was right.
And it always seemed like he was driven by compassion, you know, by a genuine concern for others.
That comes through, and I think that's a big part of why he was so successful after he left office. He wasn't interested in power anymore. He just wanted to help people.
Through the Carter Center, Habitat for Humanity, all that. Even got a submarine named after him.
He did.
Not bad for a peanut farmer from Plains, Georgia.
Pretty remarkable, and I think it shows that his legacy goes way beyond his time as president.
It's about service, about using your influence to make a difference in the world.
That's what he'll be remembered for.
So as we wrap this up, I'm curious, what's the biggest thing that stands out to you about Jimmy Carter? What should our listeners really take away from all of this?
I think it's that leadership isn't about holding a certain office or having a title. It's about using whatever platform you have to make a positive impact. It's about integrity, empathy, standing up for what you believe in.
Well said. And I think, you know, no matter what your political beliefs are, you have to admire his dedication to his values.
Absolutely.
His tireless work to make the world a better, more peaceful place.
He's an inspiration, that's for sure.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at Jimmy Carter. You know, he's a complicated figure, often misunderstood, but hopefully we've shed some light on his life and his legacy. And if you're interested in learning more, I definitely recommend checking out his memoirs.
Or the Carter Center website.
Yeah, tons of great information there about all the amazing work they've done. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Jimmy Carter. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.